All right, boys and girls, we are back. Brand new Take Aim podcast. Excited to get the show out and excited I got to sit down and chat with my buddy Cam Coble. Cam is infamous on Facebook, to say the least. He scores a lot of deer, and he's a Boone and Crockett scorer, Pope and Young scorer. He's always at the Iowa Deer Classic, and like I said, just kind of everybody knows Cam. He scores a lot of big deer, scores a lot of net big deer. If they didn't grow it, Cam doesn't score it. So he legitimately is the man to talk to about some of the big deer that he saw throughout the country. And, you know, a lot of big deer from Iowa, and some from Kansas. Awesome buck this year from Ohio. So we talked about all those. Cam shares a little bit of each that he scored, a little story of each, which is awesome. And just a really cool show to kind of cover some of those big deer from this year. So thanks so much for Cam for being on. As you guys know, we love to talk big deer and big stories, so this show was really cool because Cam scored Mark Luster's deer that, we had Mark on this show and talked about that deer just within 48 hours of Mark killing it. So, but hope you guys enjoy. As you know, deer season never ends, guys. We'll see you again next week. And, guys, if you haven't had the chance, use the code TakeAim10 to save on HuntStand today. Upgrade to the pro version. And turkey season's coming, so it's a great time that you guys can actually use that to your benefit. Turkeys, we roost a lot of turkeys at night, set up for the morning. You can actually mark that roost spot using the HuntStand app. So make sure you check that out. Use the code TakeAim10. Download Hunt. All right, boys and girls, we are live, brand new Take Aim podcast. And excited, as always, to get another show out. And excited to be with the man whose famous catchphrase is not bad, Cam Coble from Iowa. So what's happening, Cam?
Oh, not much. Just finally winding down from my shed hunting this spring. Yesterday was my last day. I walked plenty and found some good sheds. Found, I don't know, enough. Never enough, but enough. I had fun. But
you always find some good sheds, though, down there in Iowa.
Yeah, I think last year was better for quality and numbers. I probably walked more last year, I'm thinking. I thought I'd keep track every time I went this year, so I did. I'd log it in a spreadsheet on my phone on Excel. And I ended up walking 170 miles from first part of February till the last day of March.
Wow. So 170 miles, what did that turn into shed-wise for you?
58, which, those guys that find way more than that. To me, that's good, though. I never found over, 30 years before. I mean, every year I've been out here, it's been almost a new personal best year for me, it seems like. But, I found some good ones, though, and half probably public, half private. So lucky to get on some good land. Some friends let me get on and pick up some sheds, and you got to have the antlers there. They're not too hard to find if you got the deer there and the antlers there, and get on them.
Yeah.
But, not afraid.
Part of it is walking, and you walked a lot. So you've earned 58 sheds out of that. But that's a ton of walking. Yeah. That's some impressive ground, especially when you said at least 80 or 90 miles of that was public, which is pretty wild. Would you say, Cam, you found as many on the public as private, or vice versa?
I would say more on the private, but I did find my biggest antlers on public this year, which was kind of interesting. Matt said I picked up off public, and it was such a quick hunt. A buddy was going to try to get me on a piece of private, and we couldn't get stuff arranged, and I said, you know what, I'm not going to scrap this day, so I ran down to a public spot and a little bit of ways from there, and 2.5 mile walk. I got 3 antlers that day, and a real good, my best set of the year, best sheds of the year. And nothing super crazy big, but they're pretty nice to me. It should be real good in this fall.
What would you say they are? Is it a mainframe 10, or what kind of shed is it?
Mainframe 10. His right side was chewed pretty bad. I scored him just for the heck of it because I like to know. As he sits right there with the 17 to spread, he'd been about 155 gross.
Dang, that's a nice buck.
And what's cool, they were sitting. I walked by and they were just sitting right beside each other. I just laughed and I just almost had to pinch myself and say, "You kidding me?" It was raining that day and cold and blustery. And God probably shouldn't have been out there antler hunt, but I like those cloudy days. You can see a lot better. The antlers just seem to pop. A rainy, cloudy day is the best day to shed hunt. And these last few days I've went, it's been sunshine, and it's been cold, but the sun's been shining, and it creates shadows. I just don't like it as well.
Yeah. You like the overcast days a little better? You think the antlers pop a little more?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think if you ask any serious shed hunter, they'll tell you the same thing, that overcast days, rainy days, cloudy days are the best shed days.
Now,
I have to guess.
Throughout the season, Cam, did you hear of anybody or anybody in your kind of inner circle there in Iowa that came up with a good set of sheds or a couple sets?
Let me think about that. Yeah, a buddy over the eastern part of the state found a real big set. I don't know what the numbers are on them. I asked him. I'm sure they look, to me, just looking at the picture, they look over 170 with no spread.
Wow, that's a big deer. Jesus.
Yeah, he's not put a number on them yet. And I asked him a couple weeks ago, but I know they finally picked up on the side. And other guys have found good ones. I really can't think of anybody. Some guys I used to go with a couple years ago. One of his guy's brother found a real good set about a week ago towards the tail end of his shed hunting. They looked in the 160s or so.
Yeah, that's good deer too.
But other than that, no, I haven't. I think people stay more tight-lipped about sheds because they're still alive potentially, and I don't blame them. You know.
Yeah, I don't blame anybody for that either. I kind of would be too.
Yeah.
You know, and you know how it is. It's kind of like guys catching a big fish. First thing they ask is, where'd that come from? Well, you know, when you put it out there, that's what people are going to ask. Yeah,
I like sharing pictures, and but you can't share everything. I understand that. So.
Yeah, it's hard to share every bit of information.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I don't mind sharing pictures to help people out. It's fun. It's all why we do it. So.
Yeah, for sure. So, with that being said, if you know Cam, he is infamous for scoring deer on Facebook. And Cam, you score for Boone and Crockett and the Iowa Trophy Record books. Is that correct?
Pope and Young, Buddie Crockett, and the Iowa Trophy Record books. Just they take the numbers from Iowa Deer Show, I believe, and they put them on an online database.
Yeah.
I really don't know that it's a real.
Like a certified thing, is it?
Yeah, well, they get a lot of the numbers from the Iowa Deer Show every year, and I don't know that, I've never sent a number or score sheet into anywhere that's the state book. So when people ask if Iowa has a state book, I know they do, but I don't know where it per se goes to. I know I should probably know that, but I think a lot of those numbers come from Iowa Deer Show over the years. They compile them, and that's just where they put them in their own database.
Right. Yeah.
It's not a structure, I should say. I guess it's or streamlined as other books, but or organization.
Right. But you score the show as well, the Iowa Deer Classic. So, I thought, and correct me if I'm wrong, Cam, I thought 2020 was a really good year for Iowa, like for upper end.
It was real good. It was strong. A lot of big typicals. It was surprising. Typical deer. You'd think there'd be a lot more big typicals every year, but non-typicals always seem to outweigh them and be more big non-tips. This year was a strong typical year. There was a lot of big non-tips too, but there was a lot of big typicals. I think if I look back at my numbers just from what I ran through, because someone was asking when I put a final post on Facebook, I think there was 17 that netted over 170 typical at the deer show. That's just what showed up at the deer show. 17 over 170.
Over 170.
Mm-hmm.
As typicals.
Yes, typicals. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah, and four of them were over. I believe 4 were over 185.
Wow.
I think so. 4 were. I'd have to dig through my notes, which I don't have on me right now. I used to know the stuff off the top of my head, but I know I scored 2 of them, and that would have been 3. At least 3 over 185. Certain on that.
You're talking net score, right?
Net score, yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
Super impressive. So,
yep.
What between the Iowa Deer Classic, and I know you scored a lot of deer for the Quest Hunt Co. Shout out to those guys. I know those guys, Brian and Jeff and them, and appreciate them, and awesome. If you guys haven't checked it out, make sure to check out Quest. But between the Iowa Deer Classic and that, Cam, what were you kind of most impressed with? What a deer that you saw that you're just kind of blown away with?
I think everybody can speak and agree with this. That Matt Brunswick out of Ohio brought that giant of his down to the show. He was in the Quest Hunt competition, and he brought it down there. He was part of a team, him and his teammate. You have to bring your deer down to the banquet to have it scored, or if it's already scored, then just bring the score sheet and they, look over this and that. And that deer had some of the most shock value I've seen on any deer in several years. I mean, we're talking Coke can bases, big giant mass all the way through. Just an incredible deer. I mean, pictures don't do that thing any justice. You hold it and I was just laughing. It's so big. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. It's just the big as they come. I mean, the score doesn't reflect that deer's true size. Only 245 gross, which is amazing, but it looks way bigger than that. It's just so big. That deer was a standout.
Describe that deer's frame to everybody, because that deer was pretty unique and just absolutely huge. And like you said, when you see it, you're like, that's got to be one of the biggest deer ever, because the way it just looks, it's unreal. That it's actually unreal. It only scored 245.
And it netted, I believe, 232. And that's Boone and Crockett score. Give me 1 second. I'll tell you exactly. I got a lot of stuff on my phone, and I know what the numbers exactly are, but I can tell you a real basic number on it here, but I'm going to tell you exact. So I know I thought it was, but the mainframe typical. Let's see, it was a 6x4. I believe, yeah, 6x4 typical is 194. Typical frame grows to 194 on that deer.
Wow.
Which is,
I mean, yeah.
The mass was big, but the bases were 7 3/8. I mean, big heavy mass. I mean, I've scored a lot of big deer over the past couple of years, a lot of Boone and Crockett deer, a lot of 200-inch deer, and I know for certain I don't think I've ever scored anything that broke into the 7-inch range on the first mass measurement. That's a big time world class number when you get in that 7-inch range.
Yeah, that's insane.
On any mass measurement, 7 is incredible, and 6 is really, really good. I mean, the deer had over 40 inches of mass, easy. Just look at the scores and the numbers.
Cam, do you remember what county that deer came out of, Ohio?
Hancock.
Hancock? Okay.
Up north, yep.
Yep.
I was telling my buddy there was a score over there in Ohio that he should score. It was killed around him. I thought it was Hamilton for a long time. And he said, no, it's not. I said, I think it is. And I should know my counties better than that. It was Hancock for sure, though. But yeah, that deer, when you see that deer, hold that deer in person, that thing was just, that blew you away. That thing was so big. Everybody wanted to get their picture with that deer and hold it, and it was crazy. And super nice guy that shot it. Matt was real nice to talk to and all. And great buck.
Did he tell you a little bit about that deer or the hunt itself, Cam?
A little bit. He knew how big it was. Cause I always ask people when they shoot these big deer how big they look coming in. They just, just said those look really big and to keep it together.
Huh.
I think he shot it at 18 yards, he told me.
Wow.
Yeah, but that thing was, and then maybe it ran, I don't know, inside it fell over, but that's just what he had relayed to me, the info, and we were talking about it and holding the rack. But pretty incredible deer. That's one of the bigger deer I've seen in several years, or like I said, are handled, and the scores, that's what I said, scores hit the number, because that thing looks bigger than a lot of 250, 260 class deer. I mean, that thing will hang with anything.
Actually, Cam, what we'll do is, do you have a picture of you with that deer scoring it by chance?
I did not score it, but I do have a picture with me and Matt Brunswick holding that deer, because I just wanted to get a picture of him. But I do have a picture of him.
Yeah, send that picture to me. I'll use that for the media art for this podcast.
Yeah, I will do that.
But another great deer, I know, we had him on the podcast, but Mark Luster, your buddy, he shot a great typical as well that, again, we had on the podcast a deer called Zeus, if you guys remember listening. But, man, tell us about that, Cam, and just how that deer scored, because that deer had some great mass, as
Jeez,
well.
that deer was incredible. The funny story. So I heard Mark shot this big deer. I've done Mark for 10 years or so, and I heard Mark shot this deer because his son told me on Facebook Messenger, and I said, well, I'll get over and look at it one day. And he said, no. His son says, well, you probably ought to come over and look at that deer. And he's like 2 hours away. And I said, I'll get over there eventually. He was real adamant about it. He said, you probably ought to come look at it. You need to come see this deer. I said, okay. So I come over and green scored. Cause they threw a number out at me. And I was like, it's that big, really? I mean, I'm not doubting pictures, but sometimes pictures are hard to tell. They just are. I mean, you look at a deer, and like I said, it's just a number, but sometimes they're hard to tell. So
at this point, had you seen a picture already?
I had seen pictures,
okay.
But I just didn't think it was, you know, like I knew it was big, but the way I'll describe it to you is when I got over there, finally, I didn't know where anybody was at. They were behind the barn there taking pictures. They had somebody with a real good camera photographer taking pictures, you know, and his son came out to the truck, and I got out, and I said, oh, where's it at? And he said, it's behind the barn. They're taking pictures, I said. And my first initial reaction when I seen it, I walked around the corner of Mark's barn where he keeps his car, that Chevy Nova he has, and I walked around the corner of the barn there, and I could see him in the deer from a distance. And the best way to describe it is the rack was so big it looked cartoon characters, is how big it looked. That was my first initial reaction. I just laughed, and I said, that thing looks fake. It was so big. And the body was huge on the deer, but it just didn't look that big because the rack just overpowered it. It was just that big.
Wow. Was the deer hanging up, Cam, or just laying on the ground?
Laying on the ground like you'd walk up to it in the woods.
No kidding.
And I got pictures. I got a picture of it like that. I'm trying to. I can't go and look at the messages to that, but. Yeah, so I told Mark, I said, gosh, I said, if I knew it was this small, I wouldn't have came over. I was just laughing, joking with him. He wouldn't have made the drive if I knew it wasn't going to be that big. But, yeah, I said, a lot of hooping and hollering and celebrating and high-fiving. Just fun being around stuff like that. And you don't see it like it every day. I mean, that's a real big deer. I mean, the mass it carried was
every day.
The mass, the best way to describe it on the mass was the tines were as big around as most deer's main beams.
Yeah, that's impressive.
And you know, sometimes mass diminishes tine length on deer. This one, when you look at it, but this one it didn't affect it much because the tines were tall. They just didn't look that tall, I guess I should say, because the mass was so big because the H3 was still 6 inches in spots, and the tines were 13 1/8 on the G2s.
Wow.
It just had everything. It had 3 abnormals that, had they not been there, the deer would be number 2 in the state of Iowa with bow. As it sets and when the smoke cleared, the final score would place at about 12th all time in Iowa with bow.
Man.
It's 187 3/8 net typical. You know, the typical frame was 202, so and that was a 6x5, so you're going to lose that on the way the Boone and Crockett system is. You're going to lose that G5 on the net score. But just an incredible deer. And the mount on the thing's great, too. I mean, over there at Old Barn Taxidermy, Julian Loker did an excellent job on the mount. When I scored it was dry, he had the mount done up there. They always look way better, way bigger when they're on the mount, you know. I mean, they just do. And great mount on the deer, and the whole thing came together pretty good. But that was a real impressive deer. That's one of the bigger typicals, I've seen in a while, too. It's a cool deer.
That is really a cool deer, and for anybody that didn't catch that previous podcast with Mark, I suggest go back and listen. I literally got with Mark, I don't know, I want to say within 24 hours of him killing that deer. So it's a really good podcast, just due to the fact that it was, really fresh in Mark's memory. A lot of the stuff that it recounts in that hunt is, just right off the tip of his tongue because it just happened. So it was semi-live. And that, it's a cool experience to share that with Mark. And, that's really a once-in-a-lifetime type of typical. It's just unreal.
Yeah, it was really, I was there when they hung it off the loader bucket. The infamous picture of the
that's right.
loader bucket. I took that with my cell phone. I said, Mark was backing up, and I said, stop, and just everything was perfect there. And I took that picture, and it was just a cool picture. And you can really see how big the whole body and rack is when it's in the loader bucket. That was just a cool picture. I took that, but I was over there for the whole thing when they took the head off the carcass and took the skull plate. Had it in some of the skull plate. We were in the house right then, and after we were done with that, and the green scored it and came up with a number and slightly higher. They shrink a little bit. They're not going to shrink 5 or 8 inches. A deer won't in that drying time. What shrinks the most is the inside spread and some of the mass you lose, but that's about it I've noticed on these deer.
What would you say that is, Cam? On a deer that big, which is exceptionally big, but what would you say you would lose in that? Is it 60 days that the drying
60-day drying period? I want to say that one, I should know my numbers better. The first time I scored it, I think it was 188 6/8 net. And then the second time I was 187 3/8. So what are we looking at, 1 inch and 3/8?
Yeah.
It dried, 1.5 inches it dried. So some of the mass, and the spread. I've compared score sheets before, looked at him, and he's taking fish with everything. I mean, you'll see the shrinkage that it does a little bit, but it's not a lot. It's not a huge number. I haven't seen any big. Scored a lot of good ones over the years, and I haven't seen any big drops.
I wouldn't assume they do, to be honest. But,
no.
Well, I know you put a list out, Cam, recently of some of the deer you scored, so I'm just going to kind of go down the list and we'll talk about let's talk about some of these deer. But a 199 and 2/8 Iowa typical, 226 and 2/8 non-typical. So let's just start with those two.
The 199 and 2/8 was a muzzleloader kill. It netted 185 on it. That was a great deer. I scored that at the Iowa Deer Show, I believe on a Friday night. First night I got up there. That Friday night at the deer show, the Iowa show just missed all this COVID stuff last year because a week after that I was supposed to go to Illinois and score antlers for the Shed Club and do that show, and we didn't because COVID shut it down. So people kept asking all spring, are they going to have an Iowa show? I said, oh yeah, they're going to have it. And when they had it, and the talk was, well, it's either going to be a flop or there's going to be a ton of people, and there was a ton of people. You wouldn't have even known that there was a virus or anything like it going around, because it was a real good show, real good turnout. Friday evening, now we didn't score this many, but there was that many there. They lay a lot of them on the floor where they stage them out when we go get them to pick them up and score them, But
right.
Friday evening, 164 bucks came in.
Wow.
Yeah,
Holy
that's
crap.
I could tell it was getting real full in there. I mean, it's like going to work. It's a lot of fun, but you're just nonstop, got a rack in front of you and doing your thing, and getting it done up right and all, and you go grab another rack and it just never ends. And to get caught up was just, it seemed impossible. But finally we got caught up around Saturday afternoon. We were getting caught up to where I could take a little break and walked around the show with some friends for a little bit. And then Sunday was just some people that bring them in just for the day to get scored. But that's the busiest Friday. And that's what the talk was with the people that had done the show for many more years than me. They said, man, this is probably one of the busiest Fridays we've ever had.
That's crazy. That's good, though. I was supposed to be on my way down there, and unfortunately for me, I was exposed to somebody with COVID, and I hadn't got out of that quarantine time frame yet, and I just had, I was trying to be a responsible adult, and I just didn't feel right about going, and potentially, who knows what happened. I did end up getting tested, and, I was cleared with the test, came back negative, but still I just didn't feel right. I actually took the test, got my results back, and was still debating about going because it did come up negative. And I was just like, I just can't do it until whatever, the quarantine's over. So that was a bummer for me. I was bummed.
Yeah. I had to stay in Iowa. I didn't get to go home for Christmas because I was around people that had COVID, and I had to have a test done the day after Christmas, so I stayed in Iowa, had a test done. And out here, I don't know how it is everywhere else. I've told people that. They kind of laughed at it. you pull up to the pharmacy drive-up window and they hand you the COVID test and you do it yourself. Tip your head back, the swab up to touch up your nose, and hand it back to them, and they will email you or text you the results a few days later. And I had to do that, so I didn't go home for Christmas at all. So I guess the Iowa show was like my Christmas, a lot of fun. And
sure.
My brother came out and seen me and visited and whatever, and it's just one of those things. It's how it goes sometimes. But back to the deer though, that 199.
Go ahead, 199.
Yeah, that was a real good deer. It was this big 6x7 typical muzzleloader killed. The guy shot it the day after Christmas.
That's a giant.
But, yeah, that was a real big deer, super buck. And then the 226 scored that with the Iowa show. That was a tricky buck. Had a lot of just weird points on it, and had to really sort through the rack. I always like to get other scores' opinions. A lot of those guys have scored more years than me. It's just always good to get other opinions. So got several of the guys' opinions on certain questions I had. And, took about 2 hours to score that deer because it was at the odd rack and had like 15 inches broke off of it, and it still was 226 gross. Heck of a deer.
That would have been 240-inch buck?
It had been 240 had it been intact because the guy that shot it sent me trail cam pictures, was showing me pictures. It's kind of neat, the deer show. I did it kind of on purpose this year. I got a table set front and center so people could kind of watch, score deer, and, I wanted to see and talk to people that came by. So I'm scoring some of these deer, and I don't know who's who watching me, and I got their number in front of me on the sheet. We had to fill this paperwork out. So a lot of the guys there call the guys and tell them they got the deer scored. I just text them and say, here's what your deer scored. And I look up and they said, right here, and they wave at me. They're standing right there in front of me. They've been watching me the whole time.
That's funny.
And you go over there and talk to them, shake the hand, and tell them good deer and all that. And it's pretty cool. You get to meet a lot of good people doing that. But, like for that deer, he did the same thing. It was pretty neat, though. But, he texted me pictures, trucking pictures of the deer when it had that. The left main beam was broke off after like the G3, and it was probably like 15 inches, 12, 15 inches, something like that, he said.
No kidding.
It had been right there, 240, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a giant. So keep it moving just a little bit, Cam.
Mm-hmm.
And we could talk about any one of these, but I'm going to spoil everybody with just throwing out these numbers that are basically 200 and above because it's so crazy that I just think Iowa had such a good year. But 227 and 4/8, and stop me when you want, Cam. 215 and 2/8, 209 and 4/8, 209 and 3/8, and 231 and 0/8.
Okay, I'll stop at the 231. So the 227, kid shot that one, and this is hard for me. The first thing I got to remember all these numbers go in my head, but at 227, went to his house and scored that. Shot that big cold front we had this past year across the Midwest. He shot that the 4th October, 227. That was a super good buck. And that like 222 and 6/8. But
I'm sorry, Cam, he shot that when?
The first week of October, the 4th.
Okay.
4th
wow.
of October.
No way.
We had that big cold front. Through.
That's right. Yep.
There was a lot of big deer killed that weekend.
That week, yeah.
All across the Midwest. Not only Iowa, it's all across the Midwest. A lot of big deer were killed. That was a real good buck. He ended up taking first place in the archery non-tip with that deer at the Iowa Deer Show. Got shot. Yeah. Super good deer. Then what did you say the next was 215?
215 and 2/8, and then a 209 and 4/8.
The 209 and 4/8 was Mark Luster's. We've already talked about. Yep. That was a gross on Mark's. The 215 was that was a real good buck. That was Kitty Schaefer's buck. It was bow kill, the same area down there around Luster. That was a pretty interesting. It had a unique point on it. What I mean by that, because the G2 came up and it took a 90-degree angle straight out after when it came up. So you can measure a time, the longest outside curve. So I showed the guys, I said, I'm going to measure from the outside and do that curve. But I said, it's going to be longer from the inside of the beam out. And I measured it like that. It's, of course, longer. And you don't come across that very often. That's what's kind of unique on that deer.
Which way did it curve out?
It came, you know how most racks you'll measure from the outside of the beam on most points?
Yeah.
You measure the outside coming in. It came up, but it went out towards, like, out with the beam. The G2.
Oh, okay. Wow.
It's made like a hockey stick shape out beam, almost 90, more 90. And it was a pretty cool point on that deer. That's just what I remember on that rack. I had that 90-degree bend on that point. But that was a super good buck. Big long beams on it, 28, 29 beams, 21 inside, big frame deer, and he had it up there at the Iowa Show. It was a real good one. Then the 209 and 3/8 was a 10-year-old girl shot that in the early muzzlers or early youth season in Iowa.
Wow.
The 209 was that was a super good buck. It was 198 net. I went to their house, scored that. They got a hold of me, and they weren't too far from where I live.
Like a really young girl, right? 8th or 9th grade?
10-year-old.
Oh, 10-year-old, younger than I thought.
Yeah.
Jeez. Okay.
Yep. 10-year-old shot that with her. The dad told me they were just out. They said, we're just going to shoot anything that comes by tonight. I believe it's what he told me. He said they're going to shoot any, maybe the first buck they seen or just any deer because they're just out youth hunting, you know. But that deer came by, and that's the deer they shot.
Wow, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
So 231 and 0.8.
That deer I scored over at taxidermist that I hang out at. Sometimes I go there and see what he has, and that just was kind of it was there. I didn't know nothing about it, didn't realize what deer it was or nothing until I drove away, and I thought, that's the deer such and such was hunting, and I didn't realize I just had it in my hands, and so I called him up and said, hey, that deer you were looking for, I just scored it. And he said, really? I said, yeah. It's over at Wade Saman's taxidermy.
No kidding.
So, yeah, I was a strange coincidence that just lined up like that, and I didn't realize it was that deer. I had seen trail cam pictures of it, and I had heard it was killed, but that's about where it ended. I heard, rumor was it was killed. And it was killed. It was a bow kill, and like I said, I ran into it over there at Wade's, and I had it in my hand a couple hours looking at it, and then finally scored it, and I didn't realize it was that deer until I drove away that evening.
No way.
That was a super, super good buck, yeah.
So
that might have been the highest gross scoring deer killed out of Iowa. It probably was that I could.
Okay. Yeah, I mean that's a giant, man. That's so insane. So
yep.
Next, you had a 200 and 0.8 Missouri non-typical. Yeah,
that was a cool buck. Guy got a hold of me on Facebook. A lot of these people just, Facebook gets more advertisement for scoring than anything, I think, as far as people getting a hold of it just through social media. These guys got a hold of me and asked if I'd come down and score a deer, and I told him I would, and went down there. I'd seen pictures of that deer, but that was a cool deer. The G2 on the deer was 16 inches.
Was that North Missouri?
Yeah. Yep. Had some of the tallest G2s I've ever scored. The one G2 was like 16 even.
Yeah, I didn't even realize when you said that. 16's insane for G2.
Oh.
I mean, that's insane.
I've only scored a couple that got up around that. I've only scored one longer than that, and that was years ago in Illinois. And that's before I was an official score. It was 17 and an 8. And other than that, I've not scored a time taller than that 16 and an 8. That was just, or 16, it was 16 even.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That thing really stretched the tape out there on the G2 measurement. It's a cool deer. It was a bow kill. He shot that off the ground, like at 7 yards, he told me.
No way. That's neat.
Yeah. And again, he shot, I think he shot it the 4th of October also.
No kidding.
That cold front, the big cold front that went across early we had, I mean, there was big deer dropping all over, it seemed like. And that was, as I was telling him that, I said, I think a deer I scored up in Iowa was killed the same day you killed this one.
Wow.
So, I mean, what are the odds? But those cold fronts are magic. That's what it does in the fall. They're magic.
Yeah, I mean, this is good information. I mean, Cam said this now a couple times, so, it's something to really pay attention to. So next on that list, Cam, a 224 and 2/8 Iowa non-typical.
That was a beast. That deer, he had that at the Iowa show, scored it over his mom's house over by Cedar Rapids where he's from, and his brother actually got a hold of me on that. And I said, when he started talking on Facebook Messenger, I said, "Is your brother by the chance such and such?" He said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, okay, that's cool." I said, "Yeah, I'll come score that deer for you sometime." Because they couldn't find anybody that could work out their schedule to score the deer. I said, "We'll work something out. I'll come score." But that deer had real big mass through the tines, and super good guy. Killed that buck. He's super excited. Finally get it scored, and it came off a family farm. They've had in the family since like 1930, and his brother 4 years earlier shot a 209 gross off the same farm. So they got him. They got a good spot. It sounds like.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
What time of year was that? Was that bow season as well?
No, that was a gun. That was, I believe, the 5th of December, opening day, I want to say.
Okay.
Equipment. I could have to look up the actual date, but I know it was a gun kill.
So the next two, I'll just rip them off. A 198 and 5/8 Iowa non-typical, and then you had a 203 and 0/8 Iowa non-typical. It looks like maybe that one was from 2019, though.
Yep. The kid that shot that 203 was from that was a 19 bow. That was a bow kill. Great deer, super long brow tines. He'd not had it scored a fish or anything. They had a number on it that they'd done themselves, and they were close. And I told him I'd make it over there one day, and I finally did. And got to be pretty good friends with them and all. A lot of these people I score with or score the deer for just get acquaintances or open up doors. It's pretty cool, you get to know people, and it's pretty neat. And then at 198 was a deadhead that he picked up. That was a good buck. We thought it would break 200, but it was real close. Super good buck. So, but
those are giants too. So, I think the last two we want to talk about here, Cam, is man, I just lost it. But a 213 and 4/8 Iowa non-typical, and then I want to talk about that Kansas 211 0/8 Kansas non-typical.
The 213 was killed by a youth hunter. Kid was 13 years old. Him and his brother went out. I scored that up at his mom's house. Right before I was trying to score that one. It was dry and all, but they wanted to score before the deer show, so I went up there and scored it. And that was a really cool deer. I first seen it over at Wade Samon's taxidermy. I mean, he mounted the deer, and he mentioned to me something about it. They wanted to score it sometime. I told him I'd try and get around to it. And I held the rack back in October. That deer was killed youth season. And so I went to the house. It was on the mountain. The mountain looked great and all, and scored that deer there. And they kind of had an idea what the number, they had put a number on. They scored it, and they were real close again. Mostly people were close for the most part. There's just some judgment calls sometimes on the racks, but that was a super buck. He said he was 13 years old, shot at it. He told me he shot it 275 yards, just got lucky and hit it.
Wow. Wow.
I think he was shooting a 350 or 450 Legend, one of the two. I think he told me. Him and his brother was like 17 or 18, and he was 13. They just went out and shot it, and he took him out, and he ended up getting out.
Wow.
Pretty nice.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yep. The 211. Now that was probably the second most impressive deer at the quest hunt I seen. That was a real good deer. Bow kill. Kid shot it. I believe I talked to him down there at that show. He shot it like a day before the Kansas season was going out for the year.
Oh, no way.
Next to the last day, he missed it earlier in the year from what I remember him telling me. He missed it in the year bow hunting. He shot it next to the last day of the season, killed it. And that deer was a great deer. It's had everything, 28-inch beams, 21 inside. For having so few points, it scored really well. It's 211 gross, and I think it netted 207, but just an awesome deer. That was a super impressive deer, big typical frame. I like that deer. Just real clean looking, but it's non-tip, but just a clean looking non-tip. Didn't have a lot of extra trash or anything. Got a big portion of its score from the big typical frame.
Wow. Well, that's really cool.
Just a giant deer. Just a super deer. I was real impressed with that buck.
That's nice. Yeah, that's real nice. So before I let you go here, Cam, I mean, we just covered kind of some of the best ones, I would say, over the year. Unless I'm forgetting something, but would you say that was your top bucks, Cam?
Yeah, I looked through the notes before I was doing the podcast here, just so I can kind of refresh my memory. But I might have two more that I have to go score, 2 or 200s. But I'm about, the scoring slows down this time of year.
Sure.
Most of the scoring occurs from the first week of January clear through till the spring deer shows are over. So about now, and then it'll slow down a little bit. Then it might pick up to just hit and miss where people need something scored. But
yeah,
I've been just trying to keep track of everything I score over the years. It's just it's good to have that information on hand. And if people ever want a copy of a score sheet or something that I scored a deer, I need to check something or look at something, it's good for that. But
yeah, no, that's real cool. Now, would you say, Cam, how are you feeling? I know you've been living in Iowa now for several years, and you've done a lot of these shows. So have you correlated anything to kind of come into, let's say, hopefully we don't have some drought or something, but have you come up with any ideas correlation-wise between scoring and what you can almost predict for the next year, like, say, this coming season? Will it be good or bad or vice versa?
You mentioned drought, and I got to dig into that a little bit more, just dig some numbers up for something else I'm working on. But I've always said and felt like the drought year is the best year for big deer, for producing big racks. It doesn't make any sense, I know. But the drought year, and I'll just leave it at that for now, the drought year is, from what I have seen, the numbers and the top-end numbers, the drought year is the best year. It's not good for farming.
No.
But for racks, for deer racks, it really surprised you. And everybody's going to be surprised when I throw these numbers together and do something I'm going to be working on here with somebody. And it's really neat. You can look back in history and see it. You can look back in drought years back in history and see it. They correlate with the numbers of the top-end deer. And I've always wondered that, so I was looking through some numbers from years ago on Boone and Crockett numbers and drought years. And it's just kind of neat that it lines up like that. There's a strange coincidence it's like that.
So prediction-wise, can you give me a thought for 2021? What are you thinking? Strong year?
I don't think it'll be. It might be early to predict it already. It was a rough winter. I mean, that's the only bad thing I can say. It was a tough winter. Yeah. So there's always going to be some big deer killed. Is it going to be a banner year? I don't know. It's a little too early to tell yet.
Right.
The only thing that concerns me would be that rough winter. But I mean, there's some big sheds people found. There's going to be some big deer around. I know several buddies that had pictures of some big deer, and there'll be some big ones killed this fall for sure. But as far as like the standout years in Iowa that I've noticed is 2008, 2012. This year was really good. Last year was really good. 21. I don't know. It's like I said. I don't want to say. Yeah,
we'll just say safely it's up in the air for 2021.
Yeah. So far, I mean, I just don't know how to predict that yet. I think it'll be good, but will it be a banner? I just don't know yet.
That's all right. Yeah, I mean, if anybody dives into deer numbers, it's Cam. So I figured I had to throw that out there. But I absolutely know Cam. Like, that's kind of a loaded question. You know what I mean? That's kind of hard to answer. So, but it is what it is. But anyway, Cam, thanks so much for your time today, man, and thanks for sharing all those big deer stories. And one thing I know about Cam, if that deer didn't grow it, he doesn't get an eighth of an inch. So Cam is one of the most, genuine scorers of deer, and he prides himself in talking big net scoring deer. So thanks so much, Cam, and let everybody know, Cam, between, TikTok, Snap, Facebook, Insta, where they can find you.
Yeah, I'm pretty easy to reach. It's like I said, any of those social media outlets, you can find me there. Just deer scored or something, get a hold of me, we'll work something out. I'm sure we can. But yeah, thanks for having me on. It was fun chatting with you about the numbers and deer and a little bit of that. So.
Yep, absolutely. And every week, guys, you can find us on YouTube, Outdoor Podcast Channel, Amazon Music, iTunes. And thanks again, Cam. We'll see you again real soon.
Yep, you bet.